Tonight's class is going to be Hebrews 1, verses 1 through 4. If you want to open up your Bible to that section, we'll turn some other places, so you might want to stick a marker there for this class. I've got just a couple of things to say to introduce this. Number one, this is the slide that I'm going to use as we build our outline of... I hesitate a little bit to talk about the book of Hebrews. It's a sermon. But the book of Hebrews, the written sermon. And so the very first section, like if you're going to write an outline and say, okay, how does this whole thing look? This is where it's starting. Number one, I'm going to call this the thesis statement of the whole book of Hebrews. It's like we're making the big case tonight. And the big case is who Jesus is, or rather I should say what Jesus is, that Jesus is supreme. I can't think of a better word than that. I was thinking, that's not really a word that I use. I don't ever call anything or anyone supreme, which might be a good reason for using that word. But that's what my ESV heading says, the supremacy of God's Son. Anybody got a better word? Better is that's on the thing, but better is, I mean, like better than what? But supreme is like, how do you talk about the top? That's kind of what is happening here. I need a better word for that.
It's usually used with time, but preeminent.
We've got a time factor tonight. Maybe. Preeminent would be like before everything. Yeah. Anyway, if you think of a word, I'd take it. I like for my outline, like that thing, Jesus is supreme. I like for those to mean something because that's how I can remember it. If I can put something that means something to the text, then I can remember it. But I don't think that I'm going to remember Jesus is supreme. Okay, so that's what we're doing tonight. Remember this thing that talks, every single class we're going to do, the focus of Hebrews is don't fall away. The reasoning for not falling away, the why, is because of who Jesus is. And then what am I supposed to do with that, the practical part of that. Tonight and probably this coming Sunday, we've got a gospel meeting with Dawn. I think that most of you, I don't know, maybe not, now that I look out, you really should try to be here for this meeting. Dawn does a really good job all the time. But these lessons are particularly good. So Friday, Saturday morning, and then Sunday. Anyways, Sunday we got a meeting. So today, and then a week from today, next Wednesday, we're going to be on this middle thing, which I don't regret at all. We're just going to spend 2 Wednesdays talking about how awesome Jesus is. That's the class. Like, that's what we're going to do. We're just going to make a list and talk about how awesome Jesus is. So, if that's disappointing to you, there's probably something wrong. Okay, here we go. Somebody, would you read it, please? Hebrews 1, verses 1 through 4. Okay, thank you for that. In these 4 verses, we have a list of 10 things that the Hebrew writer is going to tell us about Jesus. And I would definitely, like, I don't know if you need to write these in your Bible. You can put a little 1, 2, 3, 4. You can just put a little dot next to them. But if you're tracking this study, especially if you have a journal, like a scripture journal that you're writing in, I would write each one of these 10 things down, not just for fun to write them, but because these 10 things that we're going to talk about, it's not exactly like this, but it's almost like a table of contents. So we're going to make a list of 10 things, and these 10 things are things that you can expect to see more through Hebrews that we're going to talk about with Jesus. And so it would be nice if it was a perfect table of contents, but it's not. But maybe I'll make some reference to that tonight as we move through the list. But there's 10 things, so I don't have a lot of time. So here we go. Anything you want to say about them before we get started? The 10? Or the whole text or the intro? All right, number 1. If we're talking about how Jesus is supreme, then we're going to talk about how the Word of God that was delivered through Jesus is supreme because of Him. And I think, this is verses 1 and 2, I think it's better to visualize it like this. If you go down the left side of that chart, that you have the whole verse here. It's just broken up in pieces. So, long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, but, now we're on the other side, but in these last days, which matches up with long ago, so it's like a long time ago this is what God did, but now, in these last days, there is no, at many times and many ways, alternative. But I think that there is an implication there in that there are not lots of different prophets. Like you go through the Bible, there's lots of different prophets and there's lots of different ways that God has revealed His Word. Angels and dreams and visions and prophets and all kinds of different stuff. There's only one Jesus. And so that's kind of the alternative there. God spoke to our fathers versus God has spoken to us. And then by the prophets, by His Son. What's better? It's for each one of these things. You know what? I got to say this part too, because you will feel this in this class for sure. This thing that we're looking at right now can and probably should be a whole class by itself. Every single one of these 10 things deserves its own attention. So I've got a couple things that I want to say about this, but the comparison and what's happening here, like this is how God has spoken in the past, but now He's spoken to us in His Son, and it's better, it's supreme, it's better than anything ever that there ever has been. And so, number 1, Jesus is supreme in this way, that the Word is better. Anything you want to say about it? I'll give you just a second to think about it if you want. I got a couple things that I want to say about it that I feel like we can't skip. The many times and many ways, if you write things like this in your Bible, I think that you maybe should write this one down. The many times and many ways is tough because that word is only used in Hebrews once. It's not used in the New Testament any other times. And so sometimes when that happens, you say, what does this word mean? Because I don't have anything to compare it to. It's used outside of the New Testament. But I think that this is interesting. This is the Lo and Nida lexicon. The Lo and Nida lexicon has a definition for this word, and it says, it is pertaining to that which occurs in many parts or is fragmentary. Fragmentary is a word that speaks to me more clearly than many times in many ways. Fragmentary is a better picture of God spoke to Abraham a little bit. But by the time we get to Moses, we're finding out that God is revealing his name for the very first time. So up till Moses, like they didn't know that they knew he was God. They didn't know that he was Yahweh. There's Abraham, there's the fathers, there's the patriarchs, there's Moses, Elijah, Elisha. Like it's fragmentary compared to Jesus who comes on the scene and he says this, which is going to be a major theme throughout Hebrews because we're going to see there's lots of different priests, but Jesus is the one. There's lots of different sacrifices in the Old Testament, but Jesus has offered his once for all. And so there's one, and it's not broken and fragmentary over thousands of years. It's one, and that's better in every way.
So, when you're talking about this, and then he's spoken finally and fully in Jesus, Jesus isn't new. Jesus, it's not like this is all brand new stuff that he's telling them in Hebrews. The pieces, the multitude of pieces throughout, but now it's taken all those pieces and it's making it into one thing. Like you can kind of see how it all fits together.
Yes, yeah. Like the whole rest of the Old Testament is like a puzzle. Now, that's not a good illustration. What would be a good illustration? There's lots of different pieces, but Jesus is like the glasses that when you put the glasses on, it brings the whole thing into focus. Yeah, Garrett and then Adam.
I was just going to say, it's almost like it's a broken mirror. And once the mirror gets put together, you look at it and see the reflection, and then Jesus is on the other side, the real thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Similarly, like 1 Peter 1:10, where he talks about the prophets who prophesied were searching and inquiring carefully, trying to figure out what they themselves were talking about.
Yeah.
And then Jesus comes as the fullness of God.
Oh, yeah. That's so much better. It's so much better. It's not to put down what they were. It's just that Jesus is so much better in every way. There's one last thing that I want to say about this, which I've never thought of before. And maybe you have, but this, I think I'm going to be using this. I think this will be useful for me. You know how one of the things that we need to do with our religious friends in our conversations sometimes is to open up the Bible and tell people that God is not still communicating with us today. No, God has done once for all. He delivered all truth. You know how we have to do that with our friends and say there's not more ongoing communication? Think about that in the light of what we're talking about right now. The argument is Jesus is better and supreme because once for all we have it right now. And if you're a person who says God is continuing to speak to me, you are invalidating this argument. It's not once for all if it's still happening even more still today. I don't want to be the guy who God says, here's my argument, Jesus is supreme, and then I'm saying something that invalidates that. Like, that's not the guy that I want to be. Anyway, I never have thought about that before, but I'll be using that with this text. It's 2 verses. It makes a good point. Okay, got one, Rob?
Yeah. So the usage of the term last days in this context, and you talked about it just a minute ago, you talked about the way you're using it is recently, and yet because those words appear in Old Testament prophecy, I can't help but to think that a line is pointing to this from these Old Testament prophets. Isaiah 2:2, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established. Micah 4:1, but in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established. And then Act 2 refers back to Joel, and this is your lesson Sunday night.
I was going to say, please quote that one, please.
Yeah, Acts 2:17 says it shall come to pass that in the last days, saith God, which is from Joel.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm over extrapolating, Brian. I don't know if I'm being fair to the text, but I've always couldn't help but seeing those prophecies fulfilled and the fulfillment being kind of pointed out for us here, or maybe it's better to say those Old Testament prophecies pointing to this.
Yeah, I think this is the way that I process that. From our perspective, most of us think of the last days as something still future. And yet the Hebrew writer was saying, in these last days, 2,000 years ago. So let's make sure we have that under our belts. Okay, number 2. God has appointed him heir of all things. What is an heir? Like, what's happening in this verse that Jesus is heir of all things? So you put the whole thing into one package, right? The heir is the one who inherits, right? But what has Jesus inherited? All things. Which, okay, so let's say, what is that saying to us? What does that mean? Everything belongs to Jesus. That's a pretty good argument about how he's supreme at the top of the pile. Everything belongs to him. But we're Bible people, and we know that the word heir probably carries a little bit more to it than just simply inheriting something when somebody dies. What else is heir doing? Why was it such a big deal for Jacob to steal Esau's birthright? Is it just because now he's going to have more stuff when his dad dies?
Authority and lineage.
Who's speaking? I'm sorry.
Authority and lineage.
Authority and what?
Lineage.
Okay. Now I have that word preeminence stuck in my head, but preeminence, like in lineage, like importance. I have some words written down with this. In ancient times, an heir has an exalted place in the family. So we're going to see one of the things that goes along with this heir language. For example, we'll see this in Hebrews, but I want to read from Galatians 4 and verse 7 to make this point. Galatians chapter 4 and verse 7 compares two things. Paul says, "You are no longer a slave, but a son. And if you are a son, then you are an heir through God." And so the comparison is between a slave versus an heir or a child. And so Jesus, it's not just a matter of who inherits all of the stuff. It's an exalted status and an exalted position in lineage, in the family, and society. So, okay, 2 things that are pretty big deals about Jesus and how he's supreme. Anything you want to say about that one? Number 3. Here you go, Ryan. Time. Did you know it was coming?
Yeah, I'm ready, I got my comment ready.
Okay, let's... Through Jesus, God created the world. And before I say anything about that, Ryan has his comment ready. So,
I love what John the Baptist said, where he knows that Jesus is coming and he says, he ranks before me because he was before me.
yeah, I love that.
And then there's huge debate in the early Christian world about who Jesus is, and people are throwing out that he's a created being. But you can't be a created being when you were there at the creation.
Yeah, I got something else for you tonight.
Ready?
Yeah. So through him, God created the world. World is one of those words that it's not wrong. I will tell you this, though. The word is plural. And so if we're going to talk about that, then it should be worlds. But if he created the worlds, we have a better word to describe that. I would say universe would be a better word. He created the universe. Except for, check this out. Here's the word in the New Testament. And you do have like this yellow chunk of all the times the word is used in the New Testament. That yellow chunk is when it says world. But what do you notice about almost every other time that that word is used?
Mostly time.
It's mostly a time factor, right? And so would it be different? Would it be different for you if I said that Jesus is the creator of the universe versus this? Would it be different if I said that Jesus is the creator of the ages? Or that Jesus is the creator of the forevers. Would that be different? I think it's different. I think it's, rather than saying, there's the moon and the stars and the sun and the planet and Jesus is the creator of all those things, I think, first of all, you just look at that word and how it's used in the New Testament. Jesus is the creator of not only all time, but how all time functions and operates, the ages. He did that.
One of the words up there is eternity, which is like all the time, right? But then that also got me thinking about infinity,
Yeah.
all the things.
Yeah. So you're going crazy now because you've got time. There's a start and a finish, but infinity goes like, there's no start and finish on that. And he's the creator of it. Just, if we're talking about the supremacy of Jesus, the time word probably does more to make the point. I'm not saying let's use it because it makes the point better, but look at the chart, like it probably should be that word.
Young's literal translates it as ages.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just that if I talk about Jesus as the creator of the ages, it's not quite as English flowy as Jesus is the creator of the universe. That's a little more tangible. But maybe the point is, it's intangible what we're talking about. Anyway, this whole class, Jesus is awesome. Like, I want us to bask in the awesomeness of Jesus in this class.
I think it's interesting how the writer introduces these things in this sequence. His speaking, his rule is one way to view the number two, his rulership, and then the power. And then it's going to continue to elaborate on who this person Jesus is and the magnitude of his words, his rule, and his power, and then how he wields all that in a way that a leader, like
Yeah.
it's the example of a leader, like how this is how the leader exercises the
Yeah.
leadership.
So one of the things that I have, I'm not sure, it's not the words that are used here, but it's in my notes anyway. You talked about those three things, but we could make categories. One of the things is going to be purification for sins. Word, prophet, purification for sins, priest, rule, king. Prophet, priest, and king. Those are big deals in the Bible, and Jesus is that. Number 4. Oh, so if you wanted to also have other verses like John 1 and verses 1 through 3, through him all things came into being, this would be the place where you would do that. Okay, number 4. He is the radiance of the glory of God. Do you remember? Your dad did an invitation on this word one time. Do you remember it? I don't know why. Of all the things, I don't know why this is one that I remember. But does anybody remember it? At the point, I'll let you say it if you remember it. The radiance, that word, let me give you a definition for the word. I wrote it in my Bible. This is BDAG. Brightness from a source. So the radiance is not the sun, it's the light that comes from the sun. Got it? It's the brightness that comes from the source. Now, does anybody remember that talk? Okay. Well, I do, so it's true. So you have the star that is the thing, and then you have the brightness that comes from the star, which is how we see it. We don't see the star. We see the light that comes from the star. How does that translate into this is what Jesus is? Jesus is the radiance, not the source, but the brightness that comes from the source. Jesus is the radiance of the glory of God. Now what would you do with that now that you know something about that word? Yep.
Something that someone pointed out once that helped me this verse,
Yeah. Yes. Same thing that I thought of with Ryan. I got even better for you coming. But you're right. Like, when you want to see the Father, you look at the radiance. When you see, like, do it right now. You look up and you see a star. It's like, you're not seeing the star. You're seeing the light that comes from the star. When you look at Jesus, you're seeing the radiance that comes from God. That's at least one way of processing that one. Number 5, you can interrupt with any of these, but got to make it through our list here. This is the one. Ryan and Mike, this is the one. There's 2 things I want to say about this one. Jesus is the exact imprint of God's nature. So if you're taking notes, there's 2 things that I want to say about this one. Number 1, exact imprint. Does any of your versions of the Bible say something different from exact imprint? Rob, what does your New American Standard say?
Yeah, I'm over in Joel 2, so sorry.
Anybody? Yeah, Normal, what do you have?
Express image.
Express image, exact imprint. Express image, that one might work really well for our way of thinking. What else you got? Yeah, Luke?
Exact representation.
Exact representation. So the Greek word for exact imprint is character. It's our word character. And it's the word that we get characteristics from. So, is Theo bouncing around here anywhere? He's in the back now. I've already had this conversation tonight. When you look at Theo, do you see any characteristics that remind you of anyone else in his family? You know what I'm talking about? That's the way that we say it, right? Characteristics. Characteristic is like, he looks just like, I can see the cheeks thing, I can see Erica, but man, that boy looks like Jude. He looks like Jude part 2 when I look at him. Characteristics. So, Norma, your expressed image, it's like, okay, character, you can see how that word comes from. Or this is a better one. Jim, I see you there. I'll come to you next. This is a better one, I think. Imagine a stamp, like an old-timey stamp that you had to pound into like a ink pad first, and then you stamp, and it's got the raised letters. You know what I'm talking about? You got a stamp. And you stamp the thing on paper, and what you see on the paper is the image of what was on the stamp. That's what Jesus is. Or at least one way to try and process thinking. He is the exact imprint of God's nature. Next, we're going to talk about God's nature, but I think I have a couple hands here.
Isn't that what they missed? The Jews in the first century, they missed his character.
Is what I can hear.
They didn't understand God's character, even though they had the scriptures.
Yeah.
And we have that danger today too.
Yeah. And, you know, I think, let's do this. Let's go to John 14 real quick, because before, I would be maybe inclined to pick on the Jews for this, but I would have missed it too. Like if I'm thinking about how do I see God? What does God look like? What does the exact imprint of his nature look like? A man from the first century suffocating to death on a cross is probably not what my first guess would be. So John chapter 14, I think this is a really neat one that goes with this. In verse 8, Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us." And Jesus said to him, "Have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'?" That verse is talking about Jesus as the exact imprint of the nature of God.
In Colossians 1:5, it says he's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I talk to atheists or people that don't believe, I ask them, well, there's millions and millions of species on Earth, and there's only one that, like us, that talks and does things like we do. And I said, and the Bible tells us that we're made in the image of God. How do you explain that? And you know, they gotta think about it, because, you know, scientists wanna teach you that we came from this ooze, and over time, generated, and, you know, it would be too much of a chance. It would never, ever, ever work that way, period. And they have to think about that.
Yeah.
And they said, I never really thought of that. And, you know, I mean, we walk and talk and do all these different things. We're made in the image of God, period. And Jesus was there telling me, you see me, you see the Father. He made us in his image.
Yeah.
He didn't just, you know, Big Bang. I mean, I've had several people stop and just think, wow, I never thought of that.
Yeah. Let me give you something else here. This is your comment. I think your comment was like, and Brian, I referred to this earlier. This is where I would make that comment about this is a description of who Jesus is. This word nature in church history has been a bear. Hypostasis, not hypothesis, hypostasis. There's this giant argument throughout the Nicene Council. And if you read in the Nicene Creed about the substance of God, it's this giant debate about this word. And so here is a definition of this word. Hypostasis denotes the underlying foundational reality of a thing, the basis of a thing, and thus what it has permanently. Or you see this in the ESV Study Bible. Thus the Son is identical in the substance of God, being himself fully God. In all attributes and abilities, the Son is exactly like the Father. He is the exact imprint of the nature and the substance of God. Okay, if we're talking about the supremacy of Jesus, probably it doesn't get any bigger than that one. Like he is exactly the image of God. Anything else you want to say about that?
I think it's hard for us to understand what the exact imprint and the boldness of that, the fact that that's such a big deal in our modern world, because we have digital copies of everything that we see, and we have the exact imprint of everything we want to look at all the time around us. Used to be a draftsman, and before digital, the analog world, I would create a copy of something. I would make an original, and I would write in yellow marker on there, original copy, because yellow doesn't bleed through when you do a photocopy. You don't see the word original copy. You just see whatever everything else is. But you make a copy of that original, and you always want to make a copy from the original so it's as close to the original as possible. But the copies were never as good as the original. You know, the facsimiles, the mimeographs, all these different things that you back there cranking on the thing, making those purple-looking copies. You know, and the smell. It doesn't have the same effect as the exact imprint. And I think we lose some of that in our understanding, because we see what you have on the board right there. It's exactly what you typed onto your computer. You know, it doesn't look any different.
Yeah. Unless there's misspelled words. And I didn't do that. Number 6. He upholds the universe by the word of his power. This is my favorite one. It's maybe not the most powerful one, but it's my favorite one. So let's do this. Let's go to Colossians 1. As you're turning over to Colossians, I want to tell you a couple of things about the way that different people think about God. Okay, there's materialism. Materialism is that there is no God. All things just exist, material. There's pantheism, which is all things are God. There's dualism, which is a material universe that is eternal in all directions, and God that is eternal in all directions. But it's dualism. There's two things that are eternal and they just always are. And then there's deism. And deism is that God is the creator of all things, but the universe is like a clock that he wound up, and he set it, and he stepped back and he said, "Go, world." And the world is just going. But the biblical picture is not that. The biblical picture is that everything about the world that is even still happening is because God is making it happen. If God stopped upholding the universe this very second, it would cease to exist. That's the way that you think about this. And so look at some of these passages. Colossians 1, starting in verse 15. Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things. And here you go. And in him all things hold together. He's the glue that keeps it working. There's two more. I think we're going to run out of time, but I don't want to skip this point. So go over to Acts 17. There's two real close in Acts 17 that I really like. Acts chapter 17 and verse 25. Paul is preaching in Athens. In verse 25, there's a comment about God, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives, that's present tense, currently now, he gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. If you have something right now, including the air that you're breathing, it's because God has given it to you. He didn't wind it up and set it aside. He's active and making it operate. He's upholding the universe. There's another one more. This is a quote. Paul quotes from a pagan author in verse 28, but Paul quotes this as if to say this is the truth. In him we live and move and have our being. And so, okay, Jesus, he's causing creation still, even now, to function. Go ahead, Luke.
Which verses were that in Acts 17?
That's Acts 17, 25 and 28. And since you're writing them down, also write down Nehemiah 9 and verse 6. That's a really good one. Nehemiah 9 and verse 6. And you preserve all of these things, God. Okay, next. Sorry for the timing factor here. Number 7, he made purification for sins. This one is so awesome because when we get to Hebrews 8, 9, and 10, we're going to talk about Jesus as the sacrifice, and we'll talk about the whole thing with purification for sins. But think about it like this. What we did with number 7. The exact imprint of the nature of God, before all things, after all things, holds all things together. So we've been talking about Jesus, and then we go like this. And he fixed your deepest problem. Like we just took the universal God and we brought him down and say, and he's the solution to your issue right now. The purification of our sins. That's awesome. That's really awesome. Number 8, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. Next to that in my Bible, my note says mic drop. I've got other verses that we're not going to take the time to read right now, but sat down is whenever Jesus has done what he was going to do and he sat down, it's over. It's not just about I'm at the right hand of God, which is an exalted position and power. It's that he's done. It's over. He sat down. Number 9, he has become much superior to the angels. I don't need to talk about that one because that's next Wednesday. 7 passages in the Old Testament. Isn't this cool? Today we have a list of 10 things, and next week we're going to have a list of 7 things. Hebrews is awesome. 7 reasons why Jesus is better than the angels. We'll make that case in just a little bit. And then number 10, he has inherited a more excellent name than theirs. So, who would like to see an angel? Wouldn't that be awesome? Like, There's so many things in the Bible, the story, I would be like, I want to see that so much. And then you look at Jesus and he's way better than any of that. He's inherited a better name. And the name that he has inherited that's better than their name is Son. He is the Son of God. Not a slave, not a child. I guess a child is not the good word to use for that. He is the Son. The Son is an exalted position. Okay. I've got time for maybe one or two comments, and then I've got one more slide that Garrett has blessed us with. Ian?
God breathed this whole entire universe, and how come people can look outside and say, oh, this was just an accident? No. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, so he just said it, and boom, it's there.
Yeah. So let's take what your comment is and make it the point of Hebrews. Your comment is, how could you not see this? Like, how could you not believe this? But here's, I think, the point of Hebrews is not, how could you not believe this? We all do believe this, and the point of Hebrews is to look at that list and say, how could you even think about falling away? Would you look at that list and who Jesus is and all this whole description, how could you even think about quitting in your walk when you look at that? And so, here you go, Garrett. You ready? I know we don't do instruments, but I kind of want a drum roll for the next slide. Garrett made me something. You have the Hebrew writer in the first century audience of Hebrews, and Stanley says, boy, have you lost your mind, because I'll help you find it. What are you even thinking about? Stopping? That's what's going to happen. I can't wait. When you get to chapter 2 and verse 1, we're going to get to the main argument of the whole thing. Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. How could you step away?